Hello, everybody. Welcome back to NYC Crime Spot. Today, I'm joined by a special guest, episode 3 of the Pergola Files. We have Frank Pergola sitting in with us here today. So, Frank, what I want to get to first today is we're going to talk about a bunch of things. I want to talk about an individual by the name of Peter Calabro.
Calabro was a New York City Police Department auto crime detective, probably from 1970 to 1979. He was very active in auto crime arrests. He's very familiar with the justice system in Brooklyn and a lot of assistant district attorneys that he used to work with. Somehow he acquired information about potential witnesses against DeMeo's auto crime operation. And he hooked up with Roy in the Gemini Lounge somehow in the 1970s. We believe that he was responsible for about 17 murders of potential witnesses against DeMeo. Katz, Conti, Costello, Quinn and Golden, and a lot of others. Calabro had two brother-in-laws. Their last name was Gentili, and they believed that Calabro killed his wife. Calabro's wife was found on the shores of Coney Island at one point, dead, and the medical examiner in Kings County ruled it a suicide. But the Gentili brothers believed that he had killed their sister. The Gentili brothers were also trying to acquire custody of Calabro's young daughter. I think she was an infant at that time. Calabro had a partner named John Doherty. John Doherty, his wife, drowned in a bathtub under suspicious circumstances also. John Doherty's brother was a co-owner in the Gemini Lounge.
Yeah, so the Dohertys, this is John, Daniel Doherty, and Charles Doherty. They grew up on Avenue P with Roy, right? That starts when Roy's really young.
Yeah,
right?
They grew up with Roy and the Persico brothers then.
Yeah.
Calabro leaves work one night in New York City in a snowstorm and goes to his home, driving to his home in Bergen County, New Jersey. He's followed by the Gentili brothers, who, when they get to a desolate spot on the road to his house, they pull up alongside of him, and the Gentili brother that was on the passenger side sticks a shotgun out the window and blows the window out and kills Calabro and goes on. Calabro's car goes to the side of the road.
Yeah, so he's killed in, I believe, March of 1980. Now, you say he's responsible for, in connection to many deaths with the Roy DeMeo crew. A lot of the times we think of Mafia Cops or Mafia Cop, we think of Caracappa, Louis Ippolito. Peter Calabro's name is not something that rings a bell in many people's heads. So apparently he got on the force in 1969, Frank, and then within 5 years, he's working for the Auto Crimes Task Force. What makes you, what is the, I mean, we've heard about the Cats, Murder Machine. We read about that, and I know you've known about that. But what led you to this idea that he may have been involved in numerous deaths in relation to the Roy DeMeo crew? Is this from intel over the years? How does that come about?
You mean, how did we learn about the 17 murders?
Yeah. How did you come to that conclusion that he was probably connected to a lot of homicides?
I got to give that a lot of thought. You're talking 40 years ago, and how we obtained that information. It came from, well, most of it came from probably Montiglio, Arena, and DeNome.
Okay. So 3 witnesses right there.
That would explain that, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of difficult going back 40 years.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah. It's interesting too, Frank, because I learned that the Auto Crimes Task Force was housed in the 109th precinct. So while you were there doing the Son of Sam, this guy was probably running around, you not knowing he was involved with the Cats case. He's probably in the same precinct as you over there. You know, it's a weird world, man. Really strange, man.
Well, we worked the Son of Sam Task Force editor 109. That's true.
Yeah.
I never ran across Calabro.
Yeah. So moving on later, obviously we talked about his homicide and the Gentili brothers angle. We learned something else in relation to this murder later. A certain individual takes responsibility for it and blames it on somebody else. In your mind, in investigators' minds, you're placing blame on the Gentili brothers.
Well, actually, some years later, we find out that one of the Gentili brothers was in jail and confessed to the mate in his jail cell that he did kill Calabro.
Okay. Okay.
So that substantiated what we believed.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about this individual, Frank. So this is somebody that a lot of people know. He started popping up on HBO in the 1990s. This is Richard, the Iceman Kuklinski of New Jersey, lifelong criminal, into burglary, got himself into the X-rated business. I think in 86 he's arrested. In 88 he goes away for 4 homicides, right? What is your opinion on Richard Kuklinski? I'm going to ask you some really specific questions, but what is your opinion on Richard the Iceman Kuklinski?
Well, what I know about Kuklinski, I mean, he was bragging to everybody that he used to hang out in the Gemini and he knew all the players, but all the surveillance we had at the Gemini and all the people that were involved in there, Dominic and Arena and DeNome, never saw the guy there. He claims he bought a gun off Joey Testa. He also, in his book, claims that he killed DeMeo. So that just gives you kind of an idea what this guy was. But let me go back to the beginning of the Iceman, how this works out. He's in jail in Bergen County, New Jersey, for a murder that he committed in Bergen County. And this is how he gets the name of the Iceman, because this guy he kills, he puts him in a freezer for some reason. And then sometime later, he puts the body back out into the street, and the murder is discovered. And you can't make this stuff up. So now he's in jail for this murder, or maybe more than one murders anyway. And this is about the time that the U.S. versus Castellano case was on in the Southern District of New York. Now, the case got a lot of publicity from the news and the Post. Every day, they covered the trial, and there were pictures and stories in the news. And he was reading this stuff and learning all about the DeMeo crew, of which he knew anything. He didn't know anything about them, but this is where he gets the idea now to say that he was hired by Sammy the Bull Gravano to kill Calabro.
So before he talks about all this Calabro stuff, obviously he's getting famous on HBO in the 1990s, and we're all, everyone's enthralled with this guy who claims to have killed 200 people. He starts connecting himself to the mafia, Roy DeMeo. I always thought, he probably got a copy of Murder Machine at some point, and he was probably, like you said, paying attention to the trials and making stuff up. Fast forward to the early 2000s, he takes credit for this Calabro thing, and he tries to frame Sammy the Bull. What happens there?
Well, he says that Sammy the Bull contacted him and wanted to kill this kid Calabro, and that Sammy the Bull gave him a cell phone to contact him after the thing. But there were no cell phones at that time. I'm living, fast forward to 2000, I'm living in Florida, and I get a phone call from the Brooklyn DA's office, a district attorney that I know. It says Gravano is under investigation in Bergen County for the murder of this Peter Calabro. Now that's based on the Iceman's lies. So I agree. He says that the attorney wants me to review the case and see what I think about it. So I agree, and he sends me a FedEx package of all the information on the pending investigation. So I reviewed the detective notes on his interviews with Kuklinski, the Iceman, and I'm noticing a pattern where the detectives are giving him information on one day, and then on the next day they come back and ask him questions on that, and he answers those questions based on what they told him the day before. So I mean, they were putting words in the guy's mouth. I take a look at the crime scene photos in a snowstorm, and you could see tire marks alongside the victim's car, which indicate that it was a drive-by shooting. Now, Kuklinski was over 6 foot tall. He says he was pointed the shotgun down into the car. If you looked at the trajectory of the projectiles, it was horizontal. So it was definitely the drive-by shooting.
So they charged him with it at first, but they never it never went anywhere. Obviously, he never
Apparently,
got
no.
convicted of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
I
is a
never heard
crazy
any
one.
more about it anyway. I sent the guy's stuff back to him, and that was the end of it.
Yeah. But from what I can tell, I mean, it's still pinned on Richard Kuklinski. They're still leaving it at that. I guess they feel good about that they got him to admit to something that he probably had nothing to do with. Is that how the prosecutors look at it?
I have no idea. All I know is that he did an HBO show, wrote a book, and God knows what else, all based on lies. You know what? I missed something I think in the last broadcast when we was discussing Ippolito. I forgot to mention that when I was retired in Florida, I kept contact with Dominic Montiglio while he was off the witness protection program for a lot of years and living in New Mexico. We had like weekly conversations. I keep in touch with him, make sure he was okay. Anyway, one day he calls me and he says, Frank, he says, I was in a library in New Mexico. And he says, in the true crime section, I see this book, Friends of the Family. He says, and I see the two detectives on the cover. He says, I know those guys. I says, why the hell didn't you tell me that in 1983? He says, you never asked me. He says, well, anyway.
That's funny.
I said, so how do you know them? He says, well, on 3 occasions I had seen them. So he begins to tell me that during the Cuban crisis, when they murdered 5 guys over some coke, and there was a big dispute between the Gambino crime family and the Cubans from Miami. He said, I was running back and forth trying to determine who this guy was that went to Miami and made this deal for this coke and then got these people killed when they came here with the coke. He says, and I determined that it was a guy named a guy in Florida that made this connection to the Cubans was a guy named Chris DeMeo. So that struck him right away. He knew it was Chris Rosenberg that was involved. So now the Cubans find out about that. They want Rosenberg whacked, and they want it publicized so they know it's been done. So I says, well, where did you meet these guys? He says, well, when I was running back and forth, he says, I was visiting this guy Pedro Paz up in Manhattan, this drug dealer. He says, and every time I went there, he says, this guy Caracappa in the book was in there, apparently a bodyguard from. Now, at that time, Caracappa was a detective in Manhattan North Narcotics, and he would have known Paz, and that's probably very true.
That's wild. Wow.
And then he says, then around 1979, he says, myself, Roy DeMeo, and Nino Gaggi are sitting in a diner on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn, waiting for the Ippolito father and son to sit down with us to discuss a dispute we're having with the Ippolito father and son. And as we look up, here come these two guys in this book, and they sit down in there and they see us, and they get up and they walk out.
Wow.
Next day, both Eppolitos are killed by Nino and Roy in a car. And then he says, again, that fat guy, he says, we're sitting in the Veterans and Friends on 86th Street one day, and here comes this fat guy with a bundle in his hand, you know, wrapped in a paper bag, and you know it's cash. And a big. He says to Nino, where's Paul? He says, he's in the back. So he goes in the back, comes out a few minutes later, and he leaves. And I said to Nino, who is that guy? He says, hey, forget about it. Don't worry about it. So those are 3 occasions that he witnessed these two guys.
Wow. That is crazy. And you also have the incident with him getting in trouble in the 80s with the Rosario Gambino file. And he got off on
Then
some technicality,
there's a little
Xerox
more.
fingerprint.
I just remembered something else about Caracappa. When we're doing the investigation, we run across this guy Paz, and his case up in Manhattan. And Walter Mack comes to me and says, you know who the detective is? Do you know this guy? I says, so he says, Steve Caracappa. I says, yeah, I know him. So he says, well, I want to get him in here, and I want to review the case, the Paz case with him. So I says, all right, I'll arrange it. So I arranged it. A little leery of him, but I arranged it because I already had that incident up in Lake George with him. So he comes in with a box of information on Pedro Paz, and they discuss that. And then he leaves, takes his stuff with him. And Walter says to me, well, what do you think? I says, I really don't trust the guy. I don't know where he's coming from, but he's the guy that gave us up, gave our location up in Lake George with Montiglio and his family. And we had to move him to Connecticut and wait for them to get put on a witness protection program. So he didn't use them. And then later on, we find out who they really are.
Yeah, and Paz was a drug dealer, but he also got indicted for auto crimes and the indictment with DeMeo. So I guess he was like helping store some stolen cars or something.
You're talking about Pedro Paz?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was indicted in our indictment of the Castellano case. There's a little more to the story. After they straighten this thing out with the Cubans and Rosenberg is killed on Flatbush Avenue, Paz contacts Nino through Dominic that he needs some money to buy more coke. So he wants to make a loan from Nino. So they arrange a $250,000 loan to Pedro Paz from the Gambinos. Now, you know, this whole fallacy about organized crime ain't involved in drugs. The leaders don't want you to draw. Well, you're going to get killed if you do. That is all a lot of baloney. Because in collateral for that loan, Pedro Paz gives Nino Gaggi a suitcase full of gold and diamonds and jewelry.
Wow.
And Paul Castellano okays that loan and probably profited by it.
Wow.
You know what? I could show you indictments in the Genovese crime family, the Lucchese crime family, the Gambino crime family, all have to do with drugs. So that whole thing's about, it's all a fallacy.
Of course. I mean, you had real drug kingpins in these families. I mean, obviously Galante, Patsy Conti. I mean, you had a lot of guys that were like multimillionaires pushing junk. And
you know, another story comes to mind. I things pop in and out of my mind. Again, I'm in Florida. I get a call from Dominic. He says, "You know this guy Dowd?" I says, "Yeah, it is the crooked cop from the 7-5." I said, "Went away. He got jail." He says, "Well, he's back out." He says, "And you know what? He's impersonating me on Facebook." I said, "What?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Yeah, he's out of jail. He's working as a bartender in the Cleveland bar and disco club in Miami, and he's on Facebook saying that I'm Dominic Montiglio. I'm down here at this bar. Come and get me." Actually, he even celebrated Dominic's real birthday on his birthday on Facebook. But Dominic was fit to be tied. I said, "Dom, what are you going to do?" I says, "You get in touch with Facebook and have them remove this program." So that's what he did, and they took him off. Subsequent to that, somehow this guy Dowd uh, ends up in Suffolk County, and he assaults his ex-wife, and he goes back to jail again.
How did Dominic come to the conclusion that this was Michael Dowd pretending to be him?
He saw it on Facebook.
But how did he know it was Dowd?
I don't remember how he knew it, but he knew it when he called me.
That's crazy.
Somebody might have known him down there and called Dominic.
That's crazy. That is wild.
Wow.
What a sicko. Wow. Can't make
like
it
I
up,
say
right?
all the time, you can't make this stuff up.
So earlier you did mention two names. You mentioned Broadway Freddy. You mentioned Vito Arena. We really haven't discussed them as cooperating government witnesses on the Castellano indictment. Of course, most of those guys on the indictment, it's like 20-something guys. They're all like related to Roy DeMeo somehow, this crazy group of individuals. They cooperate again on the Team USA. They become, right? What can you say about them, your interactions with them? Let's start with Broadway Freddy.
Well, Freddy was a guy that was originally he was a race car driver. He built a car and he was racing. He made a lot of money. Roy was watching him from the audience one day, and his car goes on fire, and he jumps out and he's waving at the crowd like it was a hero, you know. So Roy took him under his wing for that. And Freddie had no teeth, and he was raggedy looking. DeMeo dressed him up, got him new teeth, and he became Roy's driver. And he would drive Roy all over, pick up loan money. And there's a funny story about Roy that just got clicked in my mind. He got a tow truck driver that owed him a lot of money, and Roy tried to confront him in the street, and the truck driver took off with the truck, and Roy grabbed him by the bumper the bumper of the car, and he was dragging him through the street. Oh well. And anyway, getting back to Freddie. Freddie was a real rag job. He was a sexual maniac. And he really enjoyed going to Brooktown and Show World with these guys when they were taking over the pornography film distribution. And that's a whole other story. I mean, there were, I think, 6 or 7 murders committed in the takeover of that pornography, going back to the early 70s when they killed Rothenberg and took over his business. And then there was Fred Tadero, and there was the Trevigianos, and then there was Mikey DiCarlo, Mikey Muscles. That's a whole other story. Freddie gets arrested for disorder crime from the disorder crime operation from Big A on. He becomes an informant. He wants his wife to come and live with him. He had 2 wives. We get the 2 wives. One comes and lives with him on the witness protection program, and he ends up beating her up, and she leaves. So now we got to get the other wife to come and live with him, and he beats her up, and she leaves. When he finally gets off the program after the trial's over, he ends up in Texas. And we get word one day while we're in the U.S. Attorney's office and he's out in Texas that Freddy is dead. So Kenny McCabe, the organized crime expert in the U.S. Attorney's office, and my partner, the FBI agent, Artie Ruffles, take a flight to Texas, and they go investigate what happened to him. When they first got word, they said that he killed himself. But when they get there, they find out it was one of those autoerotic sexual deals where he didn't release himself and he got killed.
Okay, so I've kind of heard this before, I think. Obviously, you read about it. It doesn't say that. It says, he got a rope or whatever, what it was. He took his life. You're given this other angle where it was some sort of autoerotic asphyxiation, which is the idea that, and forgive us, audience, but we're just going to describe what it is. It's the idea of you're cutting off oxygen to your brain while you're trying to climax, and some people get off on this. Apparently, that's actually the way David Carradine died, they say. So this is how you actually believe that Broadway Freddy, or your investigators, you concluded that that's the way he lost his life, through this sexual gratification.
I believe that's what happened, yes.
Really? That is wild. I mean, and what you hear about him, I mean, I'm not shocked, but it is shocking, I suppose.
Artie Ruffles and Kenny McCabe come back and reported to us what they found out.
Wow. And did you ever converse with him while he was giving up information? What was your interaction with him?
Freddy, I ran every murder that Dominic told us about. I ran them by Vito Arena and Freddy DeNome. If they knew about it, they corroborated. If they didn't, they didn't.
Right. So apparently, Frank, the first account of the Gemini method is given by Freddy in description of the Fred Tadaro homicide. Is that true?
Yes.
Were you there for that? Were you there for that?
When he told us about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was, yeah. He describes how Fred Tadaro was going to make a deal with Roy DeMeo to purchase a car.
Right.
And Freddy gets Tadaro to come to the Gemini Lounge. And this is all because Tadaro's nephew wanted to take over his business and gave Roy $20,000 to whack him. Anyway.
Douglas Rager.
Yeah, that was Rager, who was also indicted. Anyway, Freddy brings Tadaro to the Gemini and walks him into the hallway. And Chris runs out from the side of from the living room as he gets into the kitchen with no clothes on except his underwear, and he's knifing the guy to death. Roy comes out from the kitchen and shoots him in the back of the head, wraps his head with a towel, and they proceed to hang him in the bathroom so he bleeds out and they can cut up his body. That's what Freddy describes.
Right, so that's what Freddy describes. So what were you thinking the first time you heard that? I got to know, because it's straight out of a horror film.
Listen, I was a homicide detective for 17 years. I dealt with murders and autopsies, and nothing surprises me.
Unbelievable. I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but yeah, unbelievable, really. And then obviously you heard that similar story repeated after that in reference to
it was repeated. It was repeated and repeated 79 times.
Tell me about Vito Arena. Tell me about the first time you met him and sitting down in a room with him, his physical stature, how he acted.
Vito was a huge man, and he had a big head. To look at him, he was a monster, but you would never believe that the guy was homosexual. I don't know if Paul Castellano ever found out he was, because I don't think he would have trusted him. But you know, actually, in dealing with him, he was a fairly nice guy. I mean, at one point, he had a hobby of making wallets out of leather, and he made wallets for all the detectives. You know, and it just was weird. You know, he wanted certain things. He wanted his fake. You know, if he was going to cooperate, he wanted a facelifting, and Artie
Right.
Ruffles had to talk him out of that. He was very disappointed about it. And then he wanted a pair of new boots. And Artie bought him the boots, and he wanted to stick his feet in them and put them in water so they shrink to his size. He was, you know, kind of weird. And he demanded that his lover, Joey Lee, be put in a cell with him with a barber chair. Yeah, I don't know. But that's what they did. They had to do all these things to make him cooperate.
Right. Apparently, he was asking for steaks, Bruce Springsteen records, all types of weird stuff. But as far as being in a room with him, you say he was nice. And might be a weird question for you, Frank, but you say you wouldn't guess he was a gay man. So how did he talk? What was his voice like? Was it deep? Was there anything feminine about him whatsoever? And even in the way his mannerisms were?
You would never think he was a hitman, you know.
Okay.
But when he described Scorny's
Soft
murder,
spoken or
soft spoken, yeah, he was
really?
never. He was a gentleman, really, when he came down to it.
Okay.
But when he described Scorny murder, you know, that was funny
Right.
too, because he knew Scorny was an auto thief, and he was doing very well. He was driving around in a Corvette. He had a lot of jewelry, and sort of made Vito a little jealous. So one day, him and Richie DeName get Scorny in, I think it was Richie's shop, and they're going to kill him. And because they want his car and they want his jewelry and they want the keys to his house, so they can go through his house and get his money and all. So they get him in there, and Vito goes to shoot him, and the gun don't work. We go click, click, and the gun went off, and then he shot the guy. Then they put him in a barrel, and they take him out to Cinema Riches, and they dump him in the water out there. And we actually recovered that body.
Yeah, so let's end on this, Frank. And I know people are really going to enjoy this. Once again, I put up a post. Unfortunately, we're not able to do the walk around the neighborhoods at this moment, but we're still bringing you guys some content. So I'm going to end on this because you brought up Richie DeName. In 1984, before he is scheduled to appear in court, because he has already been indicted with Ronald Ustica, even before all those other guys were indicted. Him and Ustica got indicted, and this whole thing's about to come down, right? So before he's going to go to court, he's taken out execution style with John Beta and Frederick Seiden, a 19-year-old and a 20-something-year-old who are seemingly just innocent bystanders, maybe just hanging out as friends. Talk about that night that Richie gets taken out. When did you hear about it? And everything.
Well, we heard about it probably the next day. There were Richie and two of his friends were killed in Richie's house. We determined that it was the DeMeo crew that killed him because of Freddy's testimony, I imagine.
So obviously you guys just lost a person who was indicted, maybe a potential witness, considering the way his brother decided to
Look, there were a lot of deaths connected to the Castellano thing, Castellano indictment. I mean, you had
right.
Roy DeMeo get killed. You had Paul Castellano get killed.
Yeah.
Richie. You know, you're talking about a lot of deaths in connection with that, besides the convictions. And Nino Gaggi died too.
This is true. Yeah, yeah. And then
So
Vito ends up.
we accomplished a few things. We accomplished the murders because of the indictments, and we got the convictions.
And then later on, Vito Arena, he would get taken out in Texas trying to rob a store. You know,
Yeah, the
they
store
said he had
owner
robbed
blew it.
like 2
The
dozen
store
stores
owner killed the
before.
both of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, crazy. What do you say, Frank? Can't make this shit up, right? You know, it's crazy. I always think Vito, like he got killed a year before Murder Machine came out. You know, he would have taken advantage of that. He would have been on fucking Geraldo. He would have went on every show possible. If he could have just waited 1 year, Frank, he would have been the celebrity he always wanted to be. I think.
Too bad.
I'm sure you're not losing sleep over it. All right, listen, Frank. Thank you so much for doing this recording. I think that what we're going to do is we're going to put out a notice for a Q&A. We'll do a question and answer, Frank. What do you think about that?
That'd be good. Whatever you want to do.
Yeah. All right.
I ain't going anywhere. Now I can't even walk anywhere. You know, I got to walk with a cane if I walk. And I pulled off the bandage this morning, and it's really disgusting looking.
Well, listen, we're all rooting for you. We all want you to get better, and
Well,
hopefully
thank God.
can.
Thank God the cancer's gone.
Yeah.
But it remained with 25 stitches.
God. Remind us how old you are, Frank.
Say again?
I said, remind us of your young age again. How old are you?
I was 87 in June, but I'm still walking and chewing gum at the same time.
That's right. What's your excuse, everybody? What's your excuse? All right, Frank, thanks a lot. Everybody, thank you. Please leave a comment. I'm going to put up a post asking about the Q&A. So we'll take a bunch of questions from all of you, and we'll do a Q&A segment right here on NYC.
Hopefully we'll get together again next week.
Yes, sir. Frank, thank you so much.
Good night.